Welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Kevin, and I'm here with a guest. Go ahead and introduce yourself for us.
Yeah, thanks for having me here. My name is Chong Hao. You can also call me Jason. I am a serial startup founder across different industries, but mostly AI and brain computer interface. And right now, I'm building the first BCI startup accelerator in the United States. Really nice meeting you all.
Thank you. Thank you. So, BCI, it's a very niche topic, but it seems to have gathered a lot of people's attention, especially if they're like investors or even startups. And you said you made your own sort of like BCI startup. So I was wondering, what is what is it that you're looking to do within that BCI startup?
So a little bit background about my BCI startup is called NeuroBase, and we are building the data infrastructure of neuro AI by generating highly physiologically plausible EEG data. So let's take a step back. Why does BCI industry need specific neural data? Because for or startups that deal with machine learning, they want to build a decoder model to have a better understand people's emotion, attention, cognitive level, even sleep states, better help. But in order to build those models, they need a lot of high quality data sets. But where does those data set come from? It's actually the current bottleneck for BCI industry. Because first, BCI startups have to, I would say, spend at least 50K US dollars purchase those BCI hardwares. And then BCI startups have to spend money on the compliance issues, have to spend money on paying those test objectives to get their consent. So if they do all of those three stuff, of course, depending on the situation, but I would say at least 130K. So the barrier of entry is really high, but we want to make BCI more accessible for BCI startups. So that's why our technical solution is synthetic neurodata, which is more scalable and cheaper.
Eh, Very interesting. So, with that in mind, what would your piece of advice you would give to a startup looking to get into BCI?
Yeah, but this is a really interesting question. I would say that BCI is a fairly small space and resilience really matters in order to build a more sustainable BCI business. Because essentially, well, I'm a serial startup founder compared with other ventures that I built before across education industry, music industry, and AI. I feel like creating a BCI startup is the most difficult because it requires a really versatile expertise across different fields, including compliance issues, neuroscience, business, hardware, software, machine learning, all of those type of stuff. So, like, in order to get it through, in order to make yourself stand out, it almost destined to be a lonely but difficult journey. So, really believe in yourself and be resilient. If you ever feel lonely, right now I'm also creating WorldChangers, which is actually the first BCI startup accelerator in the United States. So we are glad to help you all.
BCI, it's a hard barrier. There's like a high, big, mm, strong barrier of entry to get into. There's a lot of different data that you're going to have to need. There's money that has to be involved for like the people who like are sort of like on the line when it comes to like, do I really explore this BCI thing? Should I research it or dabble into it? People who are more tech savvy, but something that might like end up stopping them is like the fear of technology, where technology is extremely like I wouldn't say frowned upon, but for some generations, technology is scary. It's scary to have like
Mhm. Yeah,
giant progresses in technology. So
right.
for these people who are scared to sort of like see evolution within a technological space, what would your response be to someone who would just be like scared of diving into like BCI?
Being scared won't solve any problem. If you're scared of something, and if that is a valid concern, go solve that problem.
Simple and effective.
Thank you.
So with all these startups and all this experience, at the end of it, what does your vision look like for BCI progress were to reach like a fever pitch and everyone was just like working collaboratively on BCI? Where do you think it could take us?
In that case, we won't talk like what we are doing right now, because right now we use natural language to share those information. But one of the pain point for that is first language barrier. Second, there might be some misunderstanding. So talking with consciousness, the bandwidth is much higher compared with using natural language. I would say maybe after a few decades, that would be a new way for people to share information with each other. The another way is that this sounds kind of like sci-fi, but I think it's really cool for all of the human beings to have one shared brain. Right now, we spent almost 2 decades to go through primary school, high school, university to learn all of those general and compulsory courses. But if people are born with all of those general knowledge already, then I think people could spend more time exploring new cool stuff. I would say that is another. But these two, I mean, predictions or visions might sound too far away. I would say right now, from a more realistic perspective, there are two ways or two directions that are worthwhile to explore. The first one is temporal resolution. Right now, there is a delay or latency for whatever hardware you use to acquire data, basically. But if the latency could be under 100 milliseconds, then we can get more accurate results immediate, like quicker. And the another direction is spatial resolution. To take EEG as an example, EEG acquires data from different brain area and then they combine all of those data all together. But it is really hard to get a comprehensive understanding of how brain works by combining all of those pieces of information all together, right? But if like we can use some certain hardware to get a comprehensive understanding of the entire brain, it could be as delicate or as deep as the information or the brain activity from just one brain cell, then we can get better understanding of how brain works.
Very interesting. For everyday devices like phones and like, so let's say glasses or
Yep.
that lamp right there,
Okay.
how much, if BCI got to a point where it could be integrated into like many different objects, how much of this modern day technology would actually benefit from having some BCI integrated into it?
At least as long as it is a machine, you can use your consciousness to operate it. So right now, if you want to go turn on that lamp, you have to literally go to that lamp and push the button. But my imagination is that if the BCI technology is really sophisticated, then it just think about turning on that lamp and it would be turned on automatically. But from a technical standpoint, it works as it falls under the field of motor imaginary. So if you are thinking about, for example, what am I gonna eat for tomorrow breakfast? that is really hard to decode. But if you're thinking about some straightforward motions like go straight forward, go backward, leftward, stop, turn it on. Now, those directions are more straightforward and therefore easier for us to decode. So I would say if I build that, then I would build a motor imaginary data set and then I would decode those brain signals. And when I detect that you want to turn that on, maybe there is another AI agent to route it, and that AI agent is connected to the hardware.
Mhm. I see. So the brain sending signals to muscles are easier to decode than just a brain thinking about using their imagination necessarily.
Motor imagination, yes. The current another use case is for disabled people to operate a wheelchair. Since their muscles cannot move, they just think about forward, backward, and stop, and the wheelchair would act that automatically. This is already been done by a research lab in McGill.
Mhm. Yeah, I think I've seen like videos of that like a while back.
Yeah.
It's very interesting to see because if you're like sending signals that you actually want to like, there's intent. It's not just you brainstorming about food or stuff like that.
Right.
In reality, would we eventually be able to decode harder signals such as that so that maybe in the future we could eventually see what someone may be thinking like on a screen or see what their imagination really holds?
It's a really long way to go. First, there are different forms of inner voice. So when I'm thinking about something, it is voice, it is audio from the bottom of my heart. But for some people, it is a text or it could be a picture. So because it is multi-modular, essentially, it's really hard to decode. Also, the brain structure for each person varies a lot. For some people, if the scalp is quite thick, then most of the brain signals will also be blocked there. A lot of things to work on.
Yeah, that makes sense, especially considering that I'm also a bit hard-headed. So that makes sense. Not many signals can get to my brain.
That's
But
good. You're it's really secure.
mhm, security. So BCI could eventually be in my phone. I could just think and it'll like call someone, or maybe I could shoot a break signal to my laptop or my computer, and it'll maybe make a file or make a folder or something. But when we're out in public, how do we make sure that our like brain signals don't interfere with each other's? Do you think eventually technology will have to like calibrate your brain waves or something like that?
How do people communicate with each other? To be honest, I am still exploring. This is a really new field, and I think we are still too far away from that.
Mhm. And
But
think
I remember that there is a research that people can communicate with each other when they are dreaming. So two test subjects, right? The message that will be conveyed from test subject A will be appearing on the dream of the test subject B. And then when they get up, it's like 80% accurate, if I'm not mistaken.
wow, that's really like that's really cool, honestly.
Yeah.
So if you end up dreaming like about someone and they'll end up feeling that sort of presence, is that sort of what happened?
No, no.
Um,
Yeah. Still a long way to go.
mhm. So within like the deep tech space in BCI, would you end up seeing a future where BCI could end up being used for bad rather than good?
Future is predicted. but future is also built by us. So if you see a problem, no one is solving it, we should stand up and go solve it.
Mhm.
That's like what I meant by changing the world.
Definitely. And like the people who will like eventually change the world, I think, are the people who are like starting these like newer businesses, the people who are like trying to like make something out of like nothing. Like there's this problem that's been there and no one's been talking about it. And then now there are these people that are attempting to solve it. And that's what will make or break the world in the future. And with that, I would like to ask for people who are just starting up a business related to BCI, in your opinion, how could they more successfully appeal to investors who are still on the border of wanting to get into BCI but not entirely sure? What would you say would be the best way to not necessarily convince them, but make them see a startup's vision?
A really good question. So as an investor, I'll answer this question not from a founder's perspective, but from an investor's perspective. I understand that it makes no sense to analyze financials in the beginning because for deep tech companies like BCI, it's really possible that in the first 3 to 5 years, there is basically no income coming in. In that case, we would evaluate the quality of the founding team, technical feasibility. So believe it or not, investors read a lot of research paper every day because we have to evaluate it. The long-term vision, and then when the technology is really sophisticated, then the follow-up question asked by investors would be, how is the legal protection? Are there any patents? Right. So legal protection, I would say to evaluate an early stage deep company like BCI, those type of things that I would look into. But on top of that, I would say that investors are not convinced. Mediocre startup founders reach out to capital because they don't have a lot of choices. But outlier founders select capital. So if you don't think there is not a good fit for founders and investors, you shouldn't reach out to them. And actually, my general advice is never reach out to investors. Let them reach out to you because there are venture scouts and VC. Trust their capability. If you're good enough, they're gonna come talk to you.
I get what you're saying because eventually, if you're because there's so many like people who can analyze and like understand what a like startup's trying to do and like even background checks along that line. If they like notice you, then they're going to end up like reaching out themselves instead of like you going to them. It's
Yeah,
like almost cold calling in a way.
right. To elaborate more on that, the first question that angel investors or venture capitalists will ask themselves is that why do I see this deal? If founders reach out to them, then that means that founders don't have a lot of choices in terms of capital. But if VC directly reaches out to founders, then that is a good sign from VC's perspective. And so VCs are looking for venture scale startups. Now, what does that mean? You have to know that only 10%, around 10% of the startups in VC's portfolio survive. The rest of 90% of the startups almost fail. So, in terms of investing in BCI startups, we are looking for one specific startup that can have at least 100x return. So, don't think small, think big. Like, think about you're going to build the next Neuralink, next SpaceX. That is what VCs are looking for.
Yeah,
And
it's
typically, to build that venture scale startups, I would say outlier founders reject more capital than they accept.
mhm. And I guess, yeah, that lines up with the idea of negotiation. Or if you go to someone, you seem desperate. And if someone comes to you, they seem desperate. It's better to have that sort of what's it called? Integrity and be able to like just trust in yourself that you're going to get noticed.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Each time founders reach out to an investor, basically they lose their leverage.
That's sort of like a lot of startups end up like relying on like interns to sort of like run their business almost. So with that, how important do you think interns really are to these new startups?
Yeah, that is a sudden pivot. Why interns specifically? Just curious.
Because I'm an intern.
Okay. Okay. I would say I would I would say interns really matter. Determined by what kind of interns, right? If for like really smart, hardworking interns like Kevin, that's definitely an asset or startup, but it's like case by case. So, I mean, seriously speaking, right? Interns matter because, well, from the intern side, they probably need this internship as a foundation for their future business. Now, from the business side, when I hire someone, I want to hire the people that I know pretty well already. So those people will be previous interns. Working as an angel investor, I would say that a lot of startups raise capital because they want to put the money into the recruitment, right? And then I would ask them, okay, what kind of people are you hiring? Most of the answers I heard is that I would only hire the people I know. This is really true, especially in Silicon Valley. So I would say that interns really matter, both for interns themselves and the business.
Makes sense. I heard like a lot of times the best way to get a job is to know someone who's already like in the job space, and then that's basically your entry point. Because if someone comes into a job, I think this is a quote from like a video that I heard, but if someone comes into like a workspace and they're like, "Can I work?" There's kind of crickets right there. But if you're someone who like goes into a workspace, you're like you end up saying hi to the workers, you end up like making conversation, you actually know these people. There's much more trust there because there's that already established relationship between the workers. So that's completely understandable.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, internship matters more, especially in BCI industry, because it's so niche. People do, for example, decoding those signals. That is a little bit uncommon for other industries. Therefore, like showing that you have a solid record of completing or achieving XYZ matters a lot if you want to pursue a career in BCI. But currently, another problem for BCI is that it is a research driven industry, meaning that only a few people start to create a business because I might be wrong, but I'm under the impression that most researchers gonna pursue stability rather than taking the risk, and that is understandable. So I would say that even makes creating a BCI startup harder.
Um, I'm going to end this off on a question that I personally have, and it's a question a lot of people who are my age have. It's the idea of full dive technology with a VR headset connected to your brain, either through like you being unconscious or you being cognitive, where that headset can simulate feeling by just messing with the brain and have you essentially be in the game. So you can feel everything that's happening. You can smell, you can taste the five senses, basically, controlling that by just using the brain and a VR device. How plausible do you think that could be in the future?
Ooh, pretty good question. Kind of put me on the spot because I focus on the data infra layer. I'm not really familiar with using BCI to simulate your touch, all of those feelings. I would say it is possible, but it's hard for me to estimate how many years that would take us to achieve. But with that being said, I am more concerned with the security side behind. For example,
When Metaverse just came out, I remember that there was a case of sexual harassment in this simulated world.
but there was no legal entity built there. So when this simulated world can be as real as the current real world, I hope that the legal stuff will be there. But actually, let me ask a question back to you, Kevin. Do you think that the current world is a simulated one or a real one?
I think it's real. I mean, from like from a game developer perspective, this is a pretty good game. If it is a game, I give it a 10 out of 10. But I'd say like the bottom line is that I'd rather treat it as if it's real than to just treat it as if it's just a simulation. So I'd rather go with the avenue that it is real rather than it's a
Yeah,
simulation.
right. Yeah, I agree with you. Kevin, have you ever created your own AI agent?
Yes, yes, I have.
Okay. That's why I think that this world is a simulated world because I used to create a bunch of AI agents to simulate a workspace. AI agents contain product manager, the CEO, CFO, and so forth. And the setting was to simulate a weekly meeting in this business. And this result seems to be really real. So I kind of reflected back on how we create an AI agent. It's basically you have to write a prompt. Back then, I thought that if this AI agent could be kind of as real as a real person, then why can't we be AI agents created by some higher civilized? That's a question that I ask myself.
That's a wow. That's like that's kind of scary. Um, but I am like aware that like AI at the end of the day is just math. So I remind myself of that whenever I'm trying to like find out what when AI can do. It's like this AI seems so alive. How is this possible? When in reality, it's just like math and tuning numbers. That's mostly what it is.
Well, in the beginning, it is, but we also have a concept called influx. When there are so many layers in neural network, AI just seems to be a person having its own intelligence. So I would say that this is a really interesting world. We are born in a really interesting society with interesting technology. If there are some certain threats or potential concerns with this technology, then the responsibility falls under,
Our generation.
right? So, I mean, I talked to a bunch of billionaires and they told me that the secret of success to build a business is that you predict the future and you build the infra for that. It's kind of like you go surfing, right? If you predict the wave, then you should prepare for it. But I think that we should do more than that. Predicting the world makes people rich, but predicting potential problems and go solve that problems is the way to contribute to the humanity. I'll end the podcast by that.
Wow, that's a great quote to end on. If someone wanted to reach out for like word or something like that, where would they go to find you?
I can attach my email address in your podcast if you don't mind.
Or like your LinkedIn?
Yeah, sounds good. Just go
All
search
right,
my
awesome.
name, Chong Hao Su.
Oh yeah, how'd you get the name Jason?
My first English teacher just gave me that name. I don't really know.
Oh. Well, fair enough, fair enough. Take care.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining.
All right. Take care, Kevin.